to see everybody. I'm going to pray to start us off because this is going to be a disaster otherwise. So, Father, we are grateful for this evening. You are good to us. We ask that you would help us to see your word in some new way today and to have some fun, because this is a fun topic, at least for me. So help us to see Moses as many of these interpreters saw them, and then to see how the New Testament works too in regard to that. And we're doing all this to your glory. So open our brains, help us to stretch a little bit. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So I said in my prayer, this is going to be fun. I don't know if it's going to be fun for you, but this is super fun for me. I get to talk about Second Temple interpreters. So maybe I should start off by explaining what that even means, because I say that a lot and people just kind of look at me strange. They don't know what that means, a Second Temple interpreter. So a Second Temple interpreter is somebody not during the building of the First Temple. Pretty good, huh? Right? Super helpful. This is a Second Temple. So yes, well, okay. Thank you, Travis, for that. So the First Temple, we're talking about what, in the 500s? Okay, is being, I'm sorry, no. We're talking about, that's the Second Temple. The First Temple is Solomon, right? So we're talking about at the very end of the first millennium. Okay, so probably 950-ish, somewhere in there, just a guess. And then that kind of area. And then, of course, they come in, they crush this temple, then they go back, you remember that, and they build a second temple. So it's really not even the time of the Second Temple building, it's the time of Herod, who comes and adds on to the Second Temple. Okay? All that stuff you don't really need to know, just bonus points, extra cash for you in case anybody asks you. But we're talking about a couple hundred years around the time of Jesus. Okay, so probably a couple hundred years before, maybe 100 years after. There's no specific, like it has to be this time, but it's the time around Jesus. So there's a lot of Second Temple writings at that time. Have you ever heard of any of them? Give me one or two that you may have heard of if you've heard of any of them. What might be a Second Temple writing that you've heard of if you took a history class or went to college? The Book of Enoch. Good one. Yep.
Hint is called the Apocrypha, if you know anything from the Apocrypha.
The Apocrypha. Okay. Yep.
Maccabees.
So Maccabees, Judith, Tobit, right? Esdras, all those ones from the Apocrypha. He gave us one from the Pseudepigrapha. Josh did. That's Enoch.
The writings of the rabbis.
Okay. The writings of the rabbis. Yes. So kind of, yes. And I'm going to allow that in this conversation because the writings of the rabbis probably go past this time period, but they're writing things that were known during this time period. So we're going to let that be included in there.
Dead Sea Scrolls.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, some of them. Yep, we got War Scrolls and things like that. Yep, some of them are Isaiah texts and stuff like that, so they predate that by quite a lot. But yep.
Revelation.
The Book of Revelation. That's a good one. Yeah, the one that you know, right? The one that's in the New Testament. So let me make it really easy for you. Can you name 26 other ones?
Matthew?
Matthew is a Second Temple.
Mark.
Right? Mark?
Luke.
John?
Good job. All right. You're all on board now. See, everybody's
Philemon.
Philemon. Good. Okay. So all of these books in the New Testament are Second Temple writings. And that's why this is important, what we're doing here. Although we're going to have fun, I hope. I'm going to just tell you a lot of stories, and your mind is just going to be laughing like, who thought of these dumb things? But these that I'm going to be telling you, they're writing at the same time as Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and especially the author of Hebrews. The reason I say especially the author of Hebrews, because he has the most amount to say about Moses. And we're talking about Moses today. So we're talking about Moses as a superhero. Okay. Now, what we've got to ask ourselves is, what does that mean? Because superhero is kind of a modern day thing that we think of, right? They have capes. Oh, they're not supposed to have capes because that gets the people in trouble. But the really super cool ones don't have capes, like Spider-Man, Captain America, Daredevil, right? These are the awesome ones. Davin, did you see Daredevil yet? Okay, that's what we're going to be doing when you get back. Get out. Watch a lot of Daredevil. All right. So what they would have said is not that he's a superhero. They would have said that Moses is somehow divine. So we're talking about the divinity of Moses. Now, hopefully none of you think of Moses as being divine. Hold on a second. My screen has changed, and I'm only seeing myself now, and that's no fun. Trust me. Okay. All right. So you don't think of Moses as divine. You think Moses is just a person in the Bible, just a regular character, doesn't have anything weird going on. But the Hebrew Bible talks about him in certain ways. So if you have your notes, which were on the Tuesday School handout, I'm going to skip a lot of things, but there's also a lot of things that I'm going to hit on that'll make it a lot easier for you. So I'm in the introduction right now, saying I'm talking about superheroes, I'm talking about Second Temple interpreters, and I'm talking about, is Moses merely human, or is there something special about him that sets him apart from all other humanity? Somehow something's going on there. And after that, I've got, like, in that whole section 2, I have these arguments from different scholars as to whether he should be considered to be divine or whether he should be human. Is this a heroic epic, or is this just another cool story? Is this meant to emphasize God's power or Moses's power? All right, and you can see, if you want to read all of those things down there, you can see a bunch of them. I'll read a couple. Van Cedar says that the heroic elements are greatly exaggerated, that he's not much of a hero in these kinds of things. And other people are going to agree with him. I'm going to say, I don't think it has to be either he's the hero or God is the hero. What I want to try and show you is that I think both of them are the hero, that both of them work together, that Moses is an icon of God, all right, that he is a little God. Okay, now don't get all bent out of shape here. I don't mean that he's actually God. I don't mean that he's actually floating up into heaven or anything like that, but he's seen, even in the Hebrew Bible, but later by Second Temple interpreters, as something above regular humanity. And you can see it right in the text with us, with that we're going to look at. So that's kind of my goal. He's not merely human. He's not merely divine. He is both. And I like this quote that I put in here about the hypostasis of Moses. If you look down there, it says, if Moses is referred to as God, why is he also termed man? And if man, why also God? You remember there's a text in Exodus where it says that Moses is to be God to Aaron. So he's referred to as God, but he's also referred to as man. The reason is this: when he was cast into the river of Egypt, he was a man. But when the river was turned into blood, he was as God. When he fled from before Pharaoh, he was a man. But when he drowned Pharaoh in the sea, he was as God. When he went up to heaven, he was a man. And in which respect was he man compared with the angels who were made entirely of fire? But when he came down from heaven, he was as God. When he went up to heaven, he was as God. Just as the angels neither eat nor drink, so too he neither ate nor drank. What is the meaning of the man? Rabbi Abin said. So here's where Travis comes in, right? This is the rabbi. His lower half was man, but his upper half was God. All right, so this is Deuteronomy Rabbah. This is just it's just the great text of Deuteronomy. It's one of the rabbis talking about the book of Deuteronomy. So I think the whole purpose of the book of Moses, or a major purpose of the book of Moses, is to show Moses off, to show that he is the correct man for the job. So anytime that you see that he is merely human, like when he starts complaining, or he says, no, I'm not going to go do that, God, or anything like that, then we see that this is a way for the text to say, see, Moses didn't even think he was worthy of this job. And yet God exalts him, or he becomes super powered in some way. God is going to do something pretty incredible with him. All right. So let's see here. We can just skip the George Coates thing. So let's go to the birth narrative, because this is where it starts getting fun. I just wanted to introduce all that stuff with a little bit of technical stuff that makes it only I can teach it. I gotta give you something, right? So unless you guys do all the research on this, otherwise you can just find all these stories yourself. I just found all these and they're just enjoyable to look through. So first of all, let's talk about mutants. Anybody know anything about mutants? Davin's the only one. All right, Davin, what do you know about mutants? It's the main thing that we know.
In the real world or in the comics?
In the comics, superheroes.
In the comics, they're superpowered people with a gene that has allowed them to have different kinds of powers.
Right. So they have a gene, right? So they didn't get their powers later on. It may have come about later on, but they're born with these powers, right? It's a genetic thing. It's the next step in evolution. That's what makes a mutant in the comic books. All right. But we're not talking about comic books, but keep in mind, right? This is just ancient mythology that we're reading here. And I don't mean, in case anybody's worried right now, I don't think anybody is, but I don't mean by mythology that none of these stories happened. I simply mean the way that they stress these things is to give it mythic elements, to give it, to shape it in such a way that Moses turns out to be some really powerful person. Okay, it's a story about him as divine or superhero. So it has mythic elements, just like Captain America has mythical elements, right? Or Wolverine has mythical elements. That's the idea here. We have Samson figures, right? Samson is definitely a mythical character in the Old Testament. We have Samson figures. We have like Gilgamesh shows up in the comic books. Hercules, Thor, right? These are all actual mythical characters that make it into the comic books. But then they just modernize. Spider-Man is kind of mythical, right? All these different characters are kind of mythical. That's what's going on with Moses here. So he is superhuman in and of himself and because God does something. So the question is he born this way or is he gifted with this in some way? That's what we're trying to ask ourselves here. So the first thing we want to see in Moses is that there are these, what we call exposure myths. Exposure myths. There are like 30 different exposure myths in the ancient Near East. An exposure myth is simply that a child gets left out to die. Right? So if you've, in Chinese mythology, it happens a lot and it's still kind of happening today, right? If you have 2 children, what do you have to do with one of them? You've got to expose them or in some way kill them. You're not allowed to have two children. And the rules, of course, in China are always changing and things are different in the village and the city, blah, blah, blah. But you get the idea, right? If you have a child that you don't want, you take them into the desert and you leave them there. You expose them to the elements, the animals get them, whatever. I know it's disgusting, it's horrible, but it's what they've got. It's what's happened. And you know, this is kind of what happens, right? They expose Moses. Moses is placed into a basket, put into the reeds, and left. Now there's a plan, at least we think there's a plan, right? With Miriam and her mom, maybe, Jochebed, but there's something strange going on here. There's exposure. And the most popular one in the ancient Near East is Sargon I. Anybody ever heard of Sargon? Sargon I is a really popular exposure myth. Over 1,000 years before Moses, okay, so Moses we're going to put in 1500 maybe, 1450. You might label him in 1250. It just doesn't matter. Somewhere in that area of time, we're not going to get into the dating, but 1,000 years before that, Sargon's mother, due to some change in her status that we don't know about, is forced to conceal her pregnancy. She can't let anybody know that she's pregnant. So after the child is born, Moses is placed, I'm sorry, not Moses, Sargon is placed into a basket sealed with bitumen and pitch, an asphalty tar kind of substance, and placed among the reeds. He's then pulled from the river by Aki, who takes it upon himself to raise the child and employs this child as a gardener. So he's been taken out of the river and now he's a gardener. It's while he's gardening that Ishtar, the moon goddess, falls for him. Okay, she sees him, he's pretty hot, she wants him. And then Sargon becomes a ruler. And of course, when you become a ruler in ancient Near East, if you're a king, you are divine. So you walk above everybody else. Okay, so you are now, a lot of people consider them, right? The pharaohs would be sons of God. And we talk about God means and many other talks that we've had here. So, but then of course, he's married to Ishtar, who is a goddess, which just increases the godlikeness of him. All right. So does that myth sound at all familiar to you? A young person who has to, who is pregnant and has to get rid of her kid. So she puts him in a basket sealed with pitch and bitumen in the water, in the reeds, and a god picks him up and a goddess falls in love with him. Not exactly the same as our Moses story, but it's certainly, you've got to go, this sounds familiar. He's placed in the reeds in a basket with the same words, bitumen and pitch, lining it. So a waterproof basket, basically. And so when you read in the Hebrew Bible these things, you're supposed to, they're going to remember this. They're going to say, we know this story. Now, if that story already exists 1,000 years earlier, now it's happening to Moses, you can say one of a couple things, right? You can say, well, these are two completely distinct stories that just happen to coincidentally sound very similar. Or you can say the author of the Hebrew Bible is playing with that myth that everybody knows. So that maybe these stories aren't meant to be giving you exact historical truth about what happened, but rather to elevate Moses a certain way. Remember the way historiography works, right? This is really important. I want to make sure nobody's misunderstanding, like I'm saying the Bible's not true. You know, I spend my whole life as a pastor. I think the Bible's true. Okay, just not to worry anybody here. But historiography isn't history. It's history writing. When you write history today, it's written very differently than it was written then. Then it's persuading you of something. Then it's trying to get across a theological idea or a political idea. And nobody expected them to be writing like a newspaper article. Even newspaper articles have bias, right? But these are purposefully meant to give bias. They're trying to tell you about Israel's hero. Somebody later on is writing about Moses and telling you how awesome he is. Okay, so here we've got Moses written in the same way that Sargon is. So the people that are reading this will go, Moses is like Sargon. We know what they're doing there. Moses is kind of godlike. I see what's happening. This is very cool. All right, that's how the readers are going to interpret this because they all know the story of Sargon. It's just a common myth at the time. So there's an Indian myth too. India is not far away, Asia, but it is far enough. But there are stories that what I'm trying to do is show you that they've spread. And this one is called Mahabharata. And Mahabharata is a story of Karna, who is the child of Kunit, the sun god, Kunit and the sun god. So they have a baby and they name him Karna. And they abandon him on the river. His mother abandons him because of her shame. And she places this child in a waterproof wicker basket with a beautiful pillow. Okay, so all of these kinds of exposure myths are taking place in here, and people are aware of them. It's in the air. Nobody's copying Sargon or copying Mahabharata. It's just, these are the stories that everyone knows. They're just in the air, and you shape them that way. They're playing with the other cultures' ideas of their kings, and they're making you, in this culture, understand who they think Moses is. They're trying to equate Moses with the royal divine figures of the past. He's pretty amazing, even as early as the Hebrew Bible. Now, we haven't done any Second Temple interpreting yet. This is all just Hebrew Bible stuff in ancient Near Eastern context. Okay, so Second Temple comes next. What we know, though, is that they want to create in Moses the idea that he is some special child. Now, I think I did a couple of these things a long time ago when we started a small group, maybe Travis and Brad. You guys might remember a couple of things that I'm going to talk about now. But even in his birth, he has these characteristics of a king. Remember the mutant idea? Even in his birth, there's already something special about him. and it gets
You talking
really
about-
special.
You talking about
What?
the small group where you ditched us? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that one. Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for remembering that. I needed a break. Life was hard and things were going on. So, but thank you for bringing that up. And
We still
try again.
love it.
Yeah, sure. So Josephus. Hi, Ellie. What's up, Will? Okay, so Josephus is a writer that all of you guys should be familiar with. You probably heard it from some pastor quoting him because he's talking about the time period that Jesus lived in. So he's writing stories about the past and all the way up until the time of Jesus because he lives during the time of Jesus. So he says that Amram is Moses' father. He says that Amram, after praying for a deliverer, received a vision that his son was going to be the deliverer. So again, even before he's born, there's something special about this child. In the New Testament, we have the same kinds of things, right? Visions are given about certain children being born that are going to do something amazing. Okay, John the Baptist, for instance. I don't know, Jesus, for instance. Right, just some of those characters that you probably heard about in the New Testament.
Harry Potter, you know?
What?
Harry Potter?
Harry Potter. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's in the New Testament somewhere. I can't remember where, but yes, it's one of those great ones. All right, so there's other things that go on in the Hebrew Bible that are just really interesting. Moses is called both a Yeled and a Na'ar. A Yeled and a Na'ar. And these are different aged children. Yeled is a little child, Na'ar might be called a lad. So a toddler or a baby and a lad. And Moses in his youth is called both of these things. And Second Temple interpreters pick up on this. They see this and they go, why would they call him both of these things? Just stick with Yeled if he's a baby in the basket, right? But there's something special about him. It's almost like he's aging overnight. That's how they would understand it. He's kind of a teenager at the same time as he's a baby. That's how special he is. So that's in Exodus 2:5. You don't care about that, but and then of course he's called, and this is where I spent a lot of time in that place that I ditched you guys, right? He's called Tov. He's called good. And the New Testament goes crazy with this, or even the Septuagint. So Septuagint, right? You guys remember what Septuagint is? Help me out, brilliant scholars.
I'm one.
Greek translation of the Old Testament.
Greek translation of the Old Testament, a particular one. This is what Septuagint looks like. Here's how it's spelled, Septuagint, right? But this is how we abbreviate it, LXX, which just means 70, because 70 interpreters got together and they all came up with the exact same interpretation. It's just a myth, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so they started interpreting this Hebrew Bible word, tov, a little bit differently. They begin to interpret it as asteon. Okay, again, you don't care about but it means beautiful. So now Moses is beautiful in his birth. There's something special about just looking at him. And Luke actually says the same thing. Luke says about Moses that he was asteon, very beautiful. And when I talked about Karna, remember the Karna Mahabharata story, right? It also says that he was very beautiful. There's something in his face, there's something in his structure, some way that he's super amazing. It says that he was beautiful as the morning sun, clad in a golden armor, and with beautiful face adorned with brilliant rings. Right? So he already has he's got a beautiful face, he's got earrings, nose rings, who knows? He's born superhero-ish. He already has all of these traits just in his birth. Josephus says that Pharaoh's daughter loved Moses because he was large and beautiful. I guess large is a good thing for a baby. Well-fed, maybe. He's large and beautiful, for God had taken great care in the formation of Moses. So even as he's born, he's plump, he's big, he's a man. He's already getting there. Okay, that's in Josephus. The princess in Josephus, in that story, remarks to her father, she says, I have brought up a child who is of a divine form and of a generous mind. Okay, so he has a divine form, see? I've brought in this divine child and what else did I say? A generous mind. Philo, also writing at the same time, he had an elegant form and healthy, vigorous appearance, and goes further to say this about Moses, that he weaned himself early. So he's like, I don't need mom's breast milk anymore. I'm good. Like, thanks, mom. We're good. And he was seen as more perfect than could have been expected at his age. I don't know what that means, but that's how Philo defines all of this in this word tov, or asteia. The rabbis said that when Moses was born, the house filled with light. So you can just imagine, just go ahead and picture this in your mind if you want to. I'm not going to try and describe exactly what you're seeing in your mind's eye, but as soon as this child comes out, there's light everywhere. So this is a superhero kind of thing, right? There's some serious stuff going on.
Clearly, he slept like 10 hours a night too, or something like that. No crying.
Yeah, that's right. There's more about him and his how he acts during his physical appearance and how he acts. So the Targum. So here's another word for you, Targum. If you get nothing else today, you're going to get a lot of cool words, right? Targum, Josephus, Philo. These are interpreters during that time period. So the Targums are Aramaic translations. Okay, so they are from Syria. They're translating the Hebrew. But when they translate, they add stuff in all the time. Some more than others. Some are pretty close to the translation, but some Targums are just filled with midrash, filled with all kinds of fantastical stories, filling in the gaps. There'll be one line here and one line in Hebrew, and then they'll add another line in here to explain something. Okay, and chances are good that most people during Jesus' time know Aramaic, and that when they go to the synagogue, they're listening to a Targum being read. Maybe not the Hebrew Bible. Probably the Hebrew Bible first and then a Targum. But they may not have known both ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. They were used to saying it in Aramaic. And so they're not getting the Bible that you're reading. They're getting other forms of it. This would be true of Matthew, Mark, Luke, these people who would have gone to the synagogues. Well, Luke probably wouldn't, he's a Gentile, but he eventually did go in there, but that wasn't his upbringing probably. All right, so in this Targum, Pseudo-Jonathan, which is filled with all kinds of fantastical references, it says that Jochebed is Moses' mom, was 130 years old. Okay, so not in the Bible, but that's okay. We just added in that cool part. She's 130 years old, but that the miracle was performed and her youth was restored in order to have this child. So she had like some kind of a drink or whatever, and she just became a young woman again so that she could have this child. It also adds that Moses was born after only 6 months. He didn't need the full 9 months because he's Moses, right? And he's still viable, and that Pharaoh's daughter was healed of inflamed blisters as soon as she took the basket into her arms. So she finds Moses, she had all these blisters, and then as soon as she picks it up, they're like, oh, like what makes somebody interpret this? Like they're just adding in stuff about her. And nobody has any real problems with it. They don't, first of all, they probably don't know that it's being added in there, but it doesn't bother them. It's almost like there's still some flexibility in telling the stories. Now, maybe they saw these stories and they thought, these stories are not real, they're fictional, don't believe them. But probably a good portion of people brought these into their understanding because they knew that this is historiography, not history. It's okay for them to add cool, fantastical extras in there. Our Bible is not a mysterious book that just gets handed down from on high by God, and then every single word is exactly, that's just not the way it works. Right? The Bible is much more complicated than that. If you get nothing else from Tuesday school, you definitely, hopefully, started to think that. It's more complicated than that. All right, so let's see. Deuteronomy Rabbah has Moses himself telling about his birth and his early years. And I think I gave you this this quote. It says, "I am the son of Amram." Yeah, there it is. "I am the son of Amram," this is Deuteronomy Rabbah, "and came out from my mother's womb without prepuce." You probably don't know that word. It's not a modern sounding word, but basically he was already circumcised. Okay, he came out without the foreskin, which is awesome. I mean, good job. He didn't have to go through that. And well, it actually says right there, and had no need to be circumcised. "And on the very day on which I was born, I found myself able to speak and was able to walk and to converse with my father and mother, and I did not even take suck of my mother's milk." Right from day one. I mean, this is definitely a mutant, right? This is some superpowered person. He's on it right from the very beginning. Yeah, and when the people saw him, this is Philo. It says, when the people saw him, they inquired as to what kind of mind it was that had its abode in his body, whether it was a human mind or a divine intellect, or something combined of the two, because he had nothing in him resembling the many, but had gone beyond them at all and was elevated to a more sublime height. So they just see him walking by, and they hear him talking, and they're just like, is that a god or is that a man? Like, we can't even tell the difference. It's like there's something amazing about him.
It's funny how this guy was like, not good enough to go talk on his own and had to have his brother do it for him,
Right. Yeah. Well, we're going to get to that because that's the calling of Moses. This is the birth of Moses. It's getting to us a few things, but yeah, that's really important to this whole story, actually. And people are going to notice it. But let me finish this one before we jump into that. Josephus suggests a truly divine wisdom when he mentioned that the crown of Pharaoh was placed on Moses's head, and that Moses the crown of Pharaoh was put on his head, Pharaoh's head, and Moses, as a young child, as a toddler, takes off the crown and tramples on it. Okay, so he's already predicting the future of what's going to happen to this Pharaoh, that he's going to be destroyed. And others say that Moses knew enough to take the crown off of Pharaoh's head and to put it on his own head. And this ticked off Pharaoh. Pharaoh was like, what the heck is going on? But he didn't know, is this just the work of a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old? It doesn't mean anything. And so what they did was they put a stone and a hot coal next to the child to see what he would reach for. Because, a coal seems way cooler, but a coal is hot, right? It would destroy him if he touched it. And it says that he started to reach for the stone because he's Moses, right? Of course. He starts to reach for the stone. He knows exactly what he's doing. But Gabriel apparently moves his hand over, so he reaches for the coal instead, and he burns his hand. And so, of course, Pharaoh looks at him and he's like, okay, he's just a dumb kid. That didn't mean anything. The whole crown thing didn't mean anything. So just see these fun stories.
Where did that story come out?
That comes from Sefer HaYashar.
Okay.
So who has that? Oh, Dr. Blaze just bought HaYashar. I just saw. She showed me a book. She's not on here, but she showed me last week that she bought it. It's super fun. All right. Let's see here. What else? Is there any other things that I want to say about his birth? All right. Let's just stop here and see if there's anything else that anybody else wants to say. Is this interesting to you at all? Or is this just fake it anyway? Just tell me you are. At this point, you're probably not going to turn it off and go away. So
we got to.
You got to suffer through it for another 30 minutes or so anyway.
Brad shook his head yes, and Davin gave a thumbs up. So
I saw them. But I started saying all that qualifications there before they did that. So at least two people.
Fascinating, Jace.
All right, thank you. All right, it's fascinating. I like that. All right. So now we move from, I've got 5 different things that I want to do. So this is the first one, his birth narratives. Okay, I really only wanted to get through 2 today, but we might get into 3, I don't know. But the second one is his battles. So Moses as a warrior, because warriors, that status elevates you. If you're able to conquer your enemies, then you become godlike. Okay, in fact, when the gods are given, when they're given they get their temple, place of worship, after they've conquered their enemies. So you remember that we talked about sea monsters and the Chaos Kampf idea, and the sea monsters, Marduk would come and defeat, Baal would come and defeat Marduk. Baal would come and defeat Yam, and Marduk would come and defeat Tiamat. Right? Their new temples and things like that. Okay, so Moses. Moses as a warrior. So tell me some comic book heroes that are warriors. That's right, all of them, right? That's the whole point. They're superheroes. They're all fighting, right? That's what makes them superheroes. We're not going to watch them if they just like sit around at home and they have superpowers. We want them to go out and protect the world. So you've got like, especially, they're supposed to be protecting their area. Okay, so in Marvel Universe, all of that takes place in New York City, pretty much, not completely West Coast. There's some other things, but it's mostly New York City. In the DC Universe, you've got like Gotham or Metropolis, fictional places. Marvel stays in the real world, and DC goes outside of the real world. But their job is to take care of that place, right? Superman takes care of Metropolis. Batman doesn't ever leave Gotham. Daredevil is in Hell's Kitchen, right? So all these different people, Falcon, Winter Soldier. Anybody see Falcon and Winter Soldier? Nobody watched that except for Davin and me? Okay. You guys really need to get out more and watch cool things. All right, good man. All right, so Falcon protects Harlem, although not in the movie, not in the TV show, he doesn't. But in the comic books, he's the protector of Harlem. Okay, so Moses is the protector of Israel, of the people of Israel. And you know that from the Hebrew Bible. You don't need Second Temple interpreters to tell you that. You know that he's supposed to protect Israel. And even in your mind, you can probably think of some times when he does that. We're going to try and bring those to light right now. So after he's commissioned, remember, after Moses is called to be a deliverer, he often ends up standing in between God and man, right? He's often like, God will come and he'll want to fight. God will want to destroy his people. And Moses is constantly jumping up in the middle and saying, no, 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 God, don't destroy your people, right? So from the very beginning, he's standing in between the divine and the human, okay? And he grows up in Pharaoh's house. So it says that it came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brother and looked on their hard labors. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So twice we're told that this is his gang, right? It's his people. So he looked this way and that, and when he saw that there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hit him in the sand. Okay, you know that story? You remember Moses killing the Egyptian, standing up for his own people? So that's because he's a hero. That's what heroes do. They see something going down, and they protect them. They protect the underdog. So the problem is that Moses kills a man. And the rabbis and the Second Temple interpreters do not like that. Because during their time, it's not a good idea to kill a man. Maybe during the time of Moses, it might have been an okay thing to do in Hebrew Bible, but they feel like they need to justify it in some way. They have to reconcile this problem that is Moses as a killer. So they thought that he must have some extra knowledge about what's happening, about who this Egyptian was and all of that. So obviously we today don't like him to be a killer either, but probably in an effort to protect Moses' reputation, they wanted to make sure that this was not him just getting angry and going off the cuff. Okay, he was thinking about it. So back to Targum Pseudo-Jonathan. All right, so the false Jonathan. There's Targum Jonathan and Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, but it's not really false. It's just another one of the Targums. He says that right along with chapter 2, verse 12, what we just read, he adds in, remember I told you Targums add things, they just add a line in there, here and there. This says that Moses, in the wisdom of his mind, looked and considered every generation and saw that no proselyte would arise from that Egyptian, and no one from his children's children would ever repent. So that verse in Hebrews 2 that says that he saw that when he saw that there was no one around, he looked this way and that, and when he saw that there was no one around, the Targum says what he was really doing is not seeing that no one was around. He was looking into the past and into the future. That's what he was looking around in. So he looked into the future and he noticed nobody from his children's children will ever repent. So they're trying to justify his behavior in this case. And they saw that everything that he had done before this time was bad. So whoever this Egyptian was that he killed was not just an ordinary Egyptian. It was a super Egyptian, like the super bad Egyptian. And he has saved the world in so doing. It's okay if you kill somebody who, you know, who's not going to have anybody ever repent, who's always going to be anti-God and has always been a bad person. Then it's okay, apparently, for these people. All right. So, and it's only then that he strikes down the Egyptian. There's another Exodus Rabbah and Sefer Hayashar both say that he knew in the wisdom of his mind that this Egyptian had committed adultery with this Hebrew's wife. And that's why the battle was going on in the beginning. And that's why Moses is justified in killing him. All right, so we've got all these different ideas as to why Moses is allowed to do this stuff, why he's righteous. But no matter what, we see him as a hero, right? So he still ends up being a hero to his people. Maybe not to everything, but to his people. But what makes him a superhero, okay, is when they start telling you these other cool stories. Not only does he know these facts in his mind, that's already kind of superhero-ish enough, but there are some great stories about how Moses becomes like marble, okay? So think about, what is it, like Absorbing Man, Davin, right? Where he just touches something marble and he becomes like marble. You know, you can't hurt him. He changes in his appearance and he takes on this gigantic form so that everyone knows that he's going to win the battle. And Sefer Hayashar, again, in the Shemos section, says, Pharaoh even tries to kill Moses by cutting off his head with his, cutting off his head on 10 separate occasions with a sword. So he swings his sword, but each time Moses' neck becomes as hard as marble and the sword has no effect. Chink! Right? So these are the stories you get about Moses to make sure that you know how awesome he really is. This is important to when we get to Hebrews. It's not just for fun, although mostly today it'll just be for fun. He's always fighting against the underdogs, or not, fighting for the underdogs. So even remember when they bring, Moses goes to the well and Zipporah is there with her sisters and stuff, and the shepherds come and it says that they threw them out, they drove them away from there. So the shepherds are being kind of violent to these women, perhaps. At least this is how the interpreters say it, that they were being violent. But he ends up becoming violent back. In the Hebrew Bible, in the Masoretic text, he's not violent. It just says that he ran them off. We don't know what that means, right? He got rid of them. He may have just said, hey, guys, beat it. We don't know. But in the interpretive stories, they want him to be a superhero. So they're throwing him all in. He's like, he just seems to puff up. He turns to marble. He becomes like a giant. He jumps these bad guys, these bad shepherds. And I think I've got a quote by Philo there. Let's see here, the well in Midian, yeah. But I swear by the celestial eye of justice, which sees what is done even in the most solitary places, that you shall not take it from them. Right, this is the well. And at all events, now justice has sent me and appointed me to bring them assistance who never expected such an officer. For I am an ally to these damsels who are thus injured by violence. And I come with a might which you evildoers and covetous people cannot face, but you shall feel it wounding you in an invisible manner. Right, so now he's like shooting out like streams of pain to people, like it's an invisible thing, if you do not change your ways. He said this, and they being alarmed at his words, since while he was speaking, he appeared inspired, and his appearance became changed so that he looked like a prophet. I don't know what it means to look like a prophet, but it worried them a lot as he was saying these things. So he's predicting the future that lightning strikes or something is going to penetrate out from him into them and cause them great pain. Because this is the kind of superhero we got here. So even as he's threatening him, he changes. Targum pseudo Jonathan again seems to imply a more physical assault in his mighty strength, and he saved them. Let's see. Hauptmann. The Bible was not interested in portraying Moses as a man who was quick to start a fight. The reader must not think that what is related in 2:12 is typical of Moses. Now, Hauptmann is one of the better, I think, Exodus scholars out there. Like if you were to have to do some coursework on Exodus, he's got three commentaries that together on Exodus. They're fantastic. I think he's missing something here. Okay, and I don't ever disagree with Hauptmann hardly. But I think he's missing the fact that there are 3 battle stories right in a row, right? That the author of Exodus has pushed these battle stories together to tell you that Moses is a deliverer even long before Moses is a deliverer. That he's a superhero before he's even being asked to go deliver. Okay, this is while he's still there and still not met, God on the mountain. And he has 3 different attacks that he saves people from. So anyway, let's see here. Did I go much further than this? All right, I'll just read this last little bit here. It should be remembered that Moses' battles, in addition to being fought with God and with man, are also fought against nature. So he fights against nature as well. I didn't even mention God as the enemy, sorry. Moses intercedes. I said this at the beginning, but let me say it even more emphatically here. He connects himself so much to the people as a hero for the people, stands up for the people, that he even offers himself as an atonement for the sins of the people. Okay, this is pretty key. So in Exodus 32 through 34, he gets in the way of God saying, I will take the punishment. I will take this for them, right? Moses stands in for the people. This should tell you something, right? There's something going on here, because when we get to the New Testament interpreters, they're going to see him as the special in-between God and man kind of person, right? So we've got God. I don't know how you want to portray God. He's not the son, but you get the idea. And you've got man. You didn't see that? Am I writing off the edge of the board and no one's telling me? Okay. You got God. Okay, and you got mankind down here. Moses is trying to prevent God, all right? Maybe he's got, it's like, don't strike them down in any way. I will take the penalty, right? So he is a perfect mediator. God picks him to save his people. And he even has to get in the way of God sometimes. And the New Testament is going to do some things with this. And we can't get into this in great depth, but there is this other guy who comes as a mediator that throws himself in the way as well. Okay, right? You've heard of him too? Jesus. All right, good. Just want to be sure on the same. Okay. So, and not only these things, so he fights against all these bad guys, these Egyptians and Hebrews even. He fights against the people out in the valley where Zipporah is, Midian. He fights against God himself, which gains him all kinds of notoriety in good ways with the people of Israel. And finally, he fights against nature. So his battles with nature usually emphasize, God's work, right? Because he's going to split open the sea and those kinds of stuff. And we'll talk about that when we get to his staff, his superpowered staff, which is next, which is 2 times from now. But he throws wood into the water. He does healing for Miriam. He puts the bronze serpent up. All of these things allow him to fight against the nature around him. And so some kind of special connection between Moses and Yahweh. He has the power of Yahweh in him. So is he a conduit for the power of Yahweh? Or is he in and of himself the power of Yahweh? Is he part of the Shekinah glory? Right, we'll talk about that when we talk about his staff. That's going to be the coolest thing. Just like Captain America has a shield, Moses has a staff, and that staff can kick some serious behind, but we're not there. So how much time do I have yet left, Travis?
25 minutes. Till 15.
Okay, this next one looks pretty long, so we probably shouldn't get into that one. So I've got 15 minutes left. All right, and for me, it's an hour to an hour and 15, so I'm okay stopping early.
It's 10 minutes till.
Oh, it's 10 minutes till, so I've got 25 full minutes to go?
Correct. 24 now.
Okay, so if I just keep wandering around and just talking, all right, we're gonna start it because it's gonna be fun. I'll just read a few of these. So this is the fact that Moses is allowed into the presence of God, right? Which no one else is ever allowed into the presence of God. This is something really special. So having this kind of power entails some sort of intimacy. And we have superheroes have the same thing where they get in, they have access in some way. They speak directly to, like Moon Knight can talk to Khonshu, the god of the moon. Thor and Hercules are both, right? They're gods themselves, and they're allowed into their father's kingdoms. So they go into, what's Thor's place called, Devin? Asgard, right? And Hercules goes to wherever he goes. I don't even know. Okay, that's Greek stuff. Okay, so Moses, of course, is able to go into it as well. Moses goes up on a mountain, right? And you think, well, that's not really a big deal, except for their understanding of mountains is a much bigger deal than we think it is. Mountains are cosmic. And we call this the cosmic mountain motif. So there's always this huge mountain, and on the top of the mountain, God lives. And usually there's a cloud around that mountain. Sometimes there's lightning and thunder coming out of it. Does that sound at all familiar to you from the Moses stories? Having heard them before, right? So he goes up into this cloud to meet with God. So he goes up on a mountain early on in the story on Mount Horeb. Remember that he's taking care of the sheep, and he climbs this mountain and he meets God at a burning bush. Okay, he comes right into the very presence of God. And the rest of the Pentateuch is constantly talking about his exclusive access to the Father. He even goes up on a mountain at one point and comes back down with his face shining like God, right? So people can't look at him. They actually veil his face. Right? That's some serious interaction with God right there. At least one tradition says that he has a veil. Other times he has to... well, he doesn't always have a veil, is all I'm trying to say. But even the veil thing brings up the superhero idea again, right? So he's wearing a mask because he's too powerful, and it's going to destroy everyone. Kind of Cyclops. We have to put on the glasses, right? Because otherwise his eyes will just destroy everyone around him. So, so the Lord, it says in Deuteronomy 34 that God knew Moses face to face, which is just absolutely astonishing to know God face to face. And he was known as faithful in all of God's house. So he's the most faithful. Now, Hebrews is going to use that. Hebrews is going to talk a lot about him being faithful in God's house and the difference between a servant in God's house, Moses, and a son in God's house, Jesus. Remember, the whole point of the book of Hebrews, a second temple interpreter, is to grab hold of Moses and Aaron and the angels and those creatures, those people who all are up here with God, not regular people, but those who are up here with God. And he's saying, you know how awesome Aaron is as the first priest of God? You know how awesome Moses is, who climbed into, you know, all those myths, right? He climbed into the lap of Pharaoh, you know, all these things that he does. This Moses, he's just a servant in the house of God. So the New Testament is going to play with this motif and say Jesus is the son of the house. Right? So read Hebrews and any of the passages about Moses. So let's see here. I've got no one was like him before or after. Let's see here. This is Marquette. This is where is there the like of Moses, and who can compare with Moses, the faithful one of his house, who dwelt with the angels in the sanctuary of the unseen. Moses Moses' house is where the angel's house is. That's how incredibly special he is. He's also called son, apostle, and faithful one of his house. And to be called the son of God, represents some sort of divinity. He's in the class of the gods to be called the son of God. Just like a king is often called in the class of gods. So he is certainly an angelic, he's part of that Godhead, right? He's in the council room with God. The Samaritan Targum claims a lot more for Moses based on Exodus, and I wrote that one there. Let's see, Samaritan Targum says, no prophet like Moses has arisen or will ever arise. He was exalted above the whole human race and progressed until he joined with the angels, as was said of him, and I will join you, in the Targum Exodus. Where is there anyone like Moses who trod the fire? Where is there anyone like Moses to whom his Lord said, stand by me now? Where is there a prophet like Moses whom God addressed mouth to mouth? Where is there a prophet like Moses who fasted 40 days and 40 nights, neither eating or drinking, and he descended carrying 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God? Okay, where is there anyone like Moses? You're supposed to be thinking Hebrews at this point, right? Because this is the same thing that Hebrews is saying about Moses, and then he puts Moses aside and says Jesus is better. So the Samaritans recognize the Pentateuch to be lifting Moses up in some incredible status. The priest of angels assimilated into the angels, joined to the angels, becoming one of the angels. When he went up to him in the cloud, covered him for 6 days, his body became holy and his holiness increased. He ascended from human status to the status of the angels. So they're just saying it straight out. This guy's like a divine being. He's plain and simple that. By combining several Hebrew verses with other Aramaic translations, the Samaritans are able to show that Moses actually was one of the sons of God. And God asks him to stand by him. Exodus 33, he says, here's a place by me, stand on the rock. As for you, stand here by me, and I'll teach you my commandments and my statutes and laws, as you teach, which you shall teach them. And then that Deuteronomy 34, that no prophet will arise like him in any way. So Moses becomes one of the standing ones. Standing ones is a technical term. So it's a divine epithet in Samaritan literature, one of the standing ones. And Philo says the same thing. So Moses is a god.
Like stand as opposed to kneel, that sort of thing.
Like standing what?
Standing as opposed to kneeling. Is that the idea?
Yes, as opposed to kneeling, but one who stands nearby. Right? So they're ready to act. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but it's close proximity to them.
Like a right hand sort of person.
Say again?
Like your right hand person, that sort of thing?
That's right. Your right hand person. Yep. The standing one. Yep. So he's a great prophet, clad himself in the name of the Godhead, and received the 5 books. And he was standing, so there's that word again, between the 2 assemblies, between the standing ones and the mortals. So he gets assimilated or mingled with the angels, and then he becomes one and mediates between man and God. And I think he's supposed to be seen as like the chief angel among all the other ones. He's the ultimate standing one, given the title that Elohim has. Let's see, I'm just trying to skip some things here. In Sipre Numbers, Moses is faithful in all of his house and ranks higher than all the ministering angels. He's called my son by God himself in the Exegoge, and also in the Death of Moses, which is another book. And God responds, I am God and you are God, in one of these passages. So he's really, you can hear the connection here. And he brought out of him a merciful man, which found favor in the sight of all flesh, even Moses, beloved of God and men, whose memorial is blessed. He made him like to the glorious saints and magnified him so that his enemies stood in fear of him. Okay. Where are we? I have Ecclesiasticus. Yeah, I can finish this. This is great. So Exodus 34 says he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights, and he didn't eat bread or water. So 40 days and 40 nights of fasting is considered to be like the most that you can do. It's like the ultimate amount, 40 days. And that ability is also found in Second Enoch. Second Enoch gives him the same thing. And Methuselah, who's the son of Enoch, offers him a meal, saying, "I'll make you anything you want." And he says, "I'm glorified. I can no longer eat food." So he's reached the top, the pinnacle of humanity, really, of Godhead. And this is what he says in Second Enoch. "And I looked at myself, and I had become like one of the glorious ones, and there was no observable difference." Okay, so he's now he's made of fire. He's glorified. He can't eat anymore. He's become an angel, the highest echelon of the seventh heaven, according to Anderson in Enoch. And yeah, that's probably good. We'll stop there, and then I'll review a little bit with that coming up, because Philo has some cool things to say too. But you get the idea. 3 different sections: his birth narrative, his battle scenes, and his ability to stand in the presence of God. So his intimacy with God are all creating this superhero mystique around him. So this is what the Second Temple interpreters are thinking of. Now, they're not just making this up out of whole cloth, right? I've mentioned a whole bunch of Bible verses. What they're doing is they're looking at the Bible, they're seeing things that are strange in it, that don't perfectly align with other things that they know, and they're trying to solve the problem. Or sometimes they're trying to exaggerate something about it to fit into their context. But the key thing here is that these interpreters have permission to do this, it seems. They're not all that much different than what Peter is doing, and what Paul is doing, and what Matthew is doing with these Old Testament passages. All Matthew is doing is grabbing hold of the Old Testament and pulling out pieces to try to prove how incredible Jesus is. Okay, that's Luke's goal. They're finding things and they're telling these stories like this. So we can get really scary in this. You can start questioning all kinds of things, like even like base creed things Travis and I were talking about earlier today, right? We can start questioning things like the resurrection of Jesus or the virgin birth, because you can see that what the authors are doing is they're grabbing hold of ideas in the Old Testament and they're pulling them forward and they're playing with them to give you an idea of Jesus, how they understand Jesus. Okay, so you can see how that might be a little bit scary. It doesn't have to be. All texts are not created equal. Okay, just because you were to say something like Mark was talking about green grass sitting on green grass and the grass wasn't really green is not really as significant as saying Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, he just rose from the dead in our hearts.
Well, the argument there is there's so many other messianic movements. So what made the Jesus movement different, and why did it succeed?
Yeah, and that is
the argument for the resurrection. Like, there's the resurrection is kind of the only thing I can think of that makes it different.
Right, but there are rising and dying gods in other religions.
Right.
So,
right.
So like the sun god is constantly dying and rising. I gotcha. Right? It's constantly happening. Every day, in fact. The sun god gets destroyed and the moon god takes over.
Right.
And the fertility god is constantly destroyed during the winter.
Right.
And the death god, Mot, takes over. So these are rising, dying gods. So people could just say, well, Jesus is just like that. He's just rising, just like we have the rising. It's just a metaphor. It's just trying to get across an understanding there. And thinking about like the virgin birth, right? I don't want to scare anybody. I want you to think. Remember, let me just say this again. I'm a pastor because I think the Bible's true, right? And Jesus has done something in my life. So I want you to understand this, but I want us to be fair with what the Bible is doing. And I want you to be aware of these things. And I don't think it shouldn't cause you to doubt Scripture. It should help you start to put things together a little bit differently. But when Luke talks about Jesus being born of a virgin, he's going back to Isaiah 7:14, right? Isaiah 7:14 talks about a virgin shall conceive and bear a child, right? And then you get to chapter 9, he shall be called Counselor, Almighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Remember all that stuff?
Isn't Isaiah playing with other myths as well with that?
Well, Isaiah might be, but I don't think so in Isaiah. So, because 7:14 uses a different word, right, for the word virgin here. It's just a young woman. So he says that he went into the young woman and she conceived. The virgin, and she was a virgin, and then he went into her and she wasn't a virgin anymore, right? So he went in and they conceived a child, and child was born. And in chapter 8, you find out the name of this child, Mahal Halal Hashbaz. No one cares. Mahal Hashbaz, right? The longest name in the Old Testament. Super cool. Learn that. Good at parties, right? But he's taking this idea from Isaiah 7:14, and he's saying, you thought that was a cool prophecy about Jesus? About God coming to rescue the people during Isaiah's time, as Assyria, Babylon are trying to come down on them, right? You thought that was incredible? Let me tell you about a virgin birth that buries that concept. And then Luke goes even further than discussing this. Not only does he say she's a virgin, but the very next line, he clarifies and says, she has never lain with a man. Just to make sure you understand, I'm not just talking about a young woman here, like she literally has never been with a man. So he's up in the ante of Isaiah 7:14 with this, but they're playing with these ideas and bringing them in. That's what the New Testament interpreters are doing. So when Hebrews does this, it's doing the same thing. When Peter jumps back there and finds it, he's doing the same thing.
And if we're going to play with it and ask questions, like, what's the theological importance, or why does it matter to our faith if Mary was a virgin or not? Does it impact who Jesus is? Right?
Yeah. So I would rather ask this question. Why does Luke tell you that? Why does he want there to be a virgin story? One answer is it was actually a virgin story. Right? Like that's what happened, and so he's just giving you history. I think that's fair. I think that's pretty good. Luke even tells you that he's doing his best to stay as chronological and as true to the facts as he can. So for me, I'm fine with that. But is it possible that he's telling the story with such a slant, grabbing hold of this stuff because he wants you to see Jesus in such a way that he has one human parent and one God parent? Kind of like Moses, maybe, right? The
theological argument would be if he doesn't have a father, that it breaks him from original sin, theoretically, maybe.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. We need him to be both. We need a hypostatic union, right? We need him to be both man and God. If he's not God in this, then he has original sin, or he's born with original sin, or as Paul would say it.
Right.
The original sin argument is only in Romans 8 and Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians, but it's not even a great argument, to be honest. So we'll just set the original sin part away. But yeah, we need him to be man and God, right? Because otherwise, how is he going to be perfect? How is he going to continue in his life without sin? So that's what he's trying to say. He's divine. He's more than mere human. See, we definitely have to have more questions about what the Trinity is and stuff like that, and what hypostatic union is. And we need to talk in terms that we understand, not philosophical terminology from 500 years ago, right? But no one's willing to do that because we'll all be called heretics as soon as we start talking about it.
I mean, that's basically how they tried to explain the Trinity in a way. Like, he's God and man, this is our way to do it, is it must have been a virgin birth, because how else could it have happened in our limited understanding of the Trinity?
Yeah, you're saying that's how Luke would?
Yeah, and even now, like, I mean, how else do you explain it, right? Like, we want that to be God and man. To make that happen in our biological sense, we need one parent who's man and one parent who's God, right?
Yeah.
But maybe there's some sort of other amazing cosmological thing that happens that we just don't understand.
Right, but what if we started looking at it?
But on the case of Moses, but also, what about the fulfillment, though, Trav? What about the other virgin births I was pointing to, the other religions that that point to virgin birth, Hinduism, Buddhism, ancient Chinese religions, and they all point. And what Luke is also playing with, I think, is the Greek aspect of the Caesars, or being born of a virgin, because they're for their God, to point to them as a godlike figure, or what you're saying is Jesus is this godlike figure because he's born a virgin, because he's half God, half human.
Right.
But what I was pointing to with the other religions is what I'm also thinking is it's pointing to fulfillment, and so somehow Jesus is fulfilling all the other myths /
Right. Yeah. He's probably not those other ones, because they don't know anything about that. But Luke is probably, he might know some of those other stories.
Why wouldn't he?
And he's talking about, well,
Library of Alexandria. I mean, would you have?
yeah, he wouldn't have, nobody would have been able to get a hold of that. That's what we did later. But I mean, you don't just walk into the Library of Alexandria and start reading. But yeah, it would have been in the air, right? People would have known some of these stories, and that's why Luke is probably using it. But I want to encourage us to start thinking about things like Trinity, hypostatic union, all these mystical ideas, the way the Old Testament is bringing them in, right? And I don't know what to do with that stuff. I'm afraid to mess with it as well, right? But if Moses is considered to be divine by the Second Temple interpreters, is there a way in which Jesus could be called divine in the same sense that Moses is called divine? What does it mean that Jesus is God? Like, that's still a question that we fight about all the time. We all say Jesus is God, but in what way is he God? Because we have God the Father, we have God the Holy Spirit, we have God the Son, right? What are these, this isn't like a family. This just means that they're all in the category of God. They all have the same mind or intentions or purposes, but they're not.
Well, just like the ancient Near East text, right? Okay, the Old Testament is borrowing from ancient Near East texts, or not, maybe in saying something
Competing
special,
with them.
competing with them,
Yeah.
right? Using the same language, so to speak, and something special about Yahweh. Right? There's something different about Yahweh, the God of Israel.
Right.
And so, in a similar aspect with Jesus, and there's something special about Moses.
Yeah.
Jesus is the new Moses. There's also something special and divine about obviously, that's our belief, right? It's grounded in Jesus.
Yeah.
And the same question I would ask is with the resurrection, as Travis did with the virgin birth, is what happens if the resurrection is somehow taken out of the picture? And that Paul says, right?
Yeah. So yes,
Worshiping in vain.
Yeah, so we do cross some kind of a boundary that I don't want us to cross, right? I think it's fun for us to step outside of that box and have some good experimental conversations. I think that's safe. And that's kind of the point of Tuesday School. We can have these kinds of conversations and think deeply. But I also want us to climb back into the box and to say, hey, there is a big difference between me saying that Jericho was not razed, R-A-Z-E-D, raised, right? Jericho wasn't destroyed, and saying that Jesus wasn't raised, right? These are pretty significant. And Paul, R-A-I-S-E-D, right? Different raised, but helps you to remember, raised and raised. Because Paul says exactly that, right? If Jesus is not literally raised, our faith is in vain, right? That's pretty significant. Yes, the authors are playing with these ideas, but they're playing with them and they're pulling them in and they're giving them some solidification. They're saying, here's some things that we can't mess with. Like, yeah, all these things, but the truth is that he is God and got up from the dead, right? And we can still ask questions about all that stuff, but we have to stay there, I think, because once we move outside of that box, I think we have to legitimately say we're not Christians. Right? That's one of that. I would say that's the definition. The big definition of Christians is we believe that Jesus raised from the dead. Okay, and I'm 100% certain of that. I've got no questions, but I still want to see how we.
And that he's God, not just a man.
Say that again.
And that he's God, not just a man.
And not just a man, right? But it's okay for us to see Jesus as a man, which we're so afraid to do.
Yeah.
Right? We forget that Jesus is just a man. Or that's not fair. He's not just a man, but that he's a man. Right? That he has all the same temptations that we have. That he, trying to do skateboard tricks, fell off and skinned his knee just like everybody else does. He can't fly. Right? He couldn't fly. There's nothing. He couldn't go, I just want to fly. He couldn't fly. He's a man, but he's also God. What does it mean? He's God from the head up and man from the, what does it mean? Right? And that's I think such a huge question for us, an ontological question, right? What's a being question? What kind of being is he? And then we get even more questions right after the resurrection, and he's wandering around, and we're just like, nobody seems to recognize him, and he goes through walls, but he does have scars in his hands, so he's still physical. Like, what in the world is this new Jesus about?
Well,
Has he been changed? Yeah.
if you ask Christians, I don't want to get into this really, but if you ask Christians, a lot of Manichaeism or Gnosticism or Neoplatonism or Platonism, or they talk about this spirit being trapped, this dualism, this dualistic mindset where the spirit's trapped in the body, and what Aristotle comes and says he disagrees with his teacher, Plato, and says, no, there's something unique about the body and the soul. And so you have this unique relationship which you have in the resurrection body, right? This new creation. And so, I mean, what does it mean to look at the resurrection and believe in the resurrection? It looks a lot like having hope in a new creation and having a restored state of existence. And I think that is real when you actually bring it into reality and have examples, illustrations that are true in your life. That's when it becomes tangible and real. And it is real in my life, at least. I can speak for my own self. But when you start playing with these, like, what is the New Testament writers even? A lot of this Second Temple literature is influenced by the culture. I mean, let's face it, it's extremely influenced.
Of course, it can't help but be.
It can't help but be.
Right.
Doesn't make it false. And so I guess our job is what Travis asked was a great question. Is if this is false, then what then? But what makes it true? And that's the question. What makes it true? How do we find?
Yeah.
And that's faith, right?
Yeah,
I
think
guess,
that's right. Yeah, maybe I just close it with that. It's faith. I don't have an answer for everything else, right? I don't know what to do with all of those things.
Tell me your bucket analogy, your holy bucket.
We're gonna make the whole bucket too.
The holy bucket analogy?
There's evidence, there's historical stuff. So like you can poke holes in it, but it's like a bucket. Yeah. You tell them.
Oh, you were doing great. Yeah, I mean, anything can have holes poked in it, right? So you come up with a theory and you poke holes in the bucket, and of course there's a lot of water is going to ship through. But if you take another theory, and you got a bunch of holes in it, right? The water's all going to go through, and you get 10 of those, that water's going to go through on all of these different things. But all of them are evidences. All of them are helps. And if you put all of the buckets together, very little water is going to go through, right? It's at least a warrant for believing what we believe. It's not a, here it is, it's obvious, right? It's not, if it was obvious, there wouldn't be any reason for faith. If we had all this figured out and it was all perfect.
What I also want to get on, if we're in Tuesday school, there's esoteric truths. There's truths that are, there's truths that are kind of underlying all religions that you look, oh, well, that's like ancient wisdom. Yeah, I see that's true.
Yeah.
It's true to virtue. I mean, that's virtuous, and that's righteous, that's unrighteous. I mean, what makes those true and not true? We were talking about laws and what is the law and what is it to not be under the law? And you just start going down rabbit holes of well, hey, what makes this true to me? In experience, is it experience?
So I think that's, yeah, we keep using this word true. I think there are subjective truths, things that are true for you. But I do also think there is objective truth. There are things that are true for everybody, no matter what, for all time. So I don't know about in rules and laws and things like that. But I think the gospel, the beauty of the gospel is that there is an objective truth there. It's not, I believe this and that's good for me. It's fine if other people want to tolerate our beliefs and be okay with those things, but I want to say with definitiveness, right, that the gospel isn't about what Jesus changes in my life. The good news is that Jesus actually did come and die and rise again. Now that gospel is applied to me experientially in my life. That's a wonderful thing. But whether he's applied to you or not doesn't change the objective truth that he did come and did die and did rise again. Right? So there is an objectivity to the truth that I want to hold on to. And I don't want to just hold on to it. I'm persuaded that it's worthy of holding on to. That it's not just this is good for us. And you know, those other people, Muslims, you know, they've got good beliefs too, and the Indians and their Hinduism. Like, yes, they do have good beliefs, but they can, in all sincerity, be wrong. It is okay for Christians to say that we are right. That's an okay statement. I don't want us to become so tolerant of everybody that we aren't willing to pound the pulpit over some things, saying that there's some objectivity here. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't sound too cruel to all of my Muslim and Hindu brothers, but I do think we have an objective truth in Jesus, regardless of whether you accept it or not.
You're going to get the donors to coexist.
I'm not going to get it, but I think it's okay for us to coexist. I think it's perfectly fine. And I'm going to still keep loving everybody who agrees with me like crazy. But I think it's okay for me to say, I think you're wrong. I'm going to say it gently and kindly, but I can say, I think Jesus is the answer. And I can try and persuade them. I think there's a place for apologetics. We really got off task, I guess, with this, but this is a good place for it to go.
I put a link in the chat for people on Zoom to a Bible Project video about the Trinity. If anybody's interested about this, people that are in the room with you, if you just Google or use your preferred search engine for Bible Project and Identity of God, it'll pull it up. So,
okay. Yeah, there's nothing so far that I haven't recommended when it comes to Bible Project. So anything that he says is probably far more accurate than anything I'm saying.
It's got some fun visuals with like a 3D object and a 2D plane, and it was interesting.
We used to do those, Caden and Davin, we used to do those as our devotions for a long time. So
You're darn good.
I'm doing it again. Yeah, cool. Is that like a handlebar mustache there, Caden?
I don't know what it's called. I was just trying to curl it around, and it's not quite there yet.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's interesting.
We'll see.
The 70-year-old look. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying some new things now that I can actually grow a beard.
Nice. All right, Travis, that's your next move. I want to see that. And Brad, you've got a nice beard. Let's see. Who else? Matt Davis. Yep. You can do this. All right. I want to see everybody with the whole curling up.
Captain Hook
mustache.
mustache or something.